This conference will now be recorded.
Well, there we are. Welcome to Excellence in Nonprofit Organizations. I think, as we were speaking earlier, this is going to be an interesting conversation that we have today because nonprofit organizations play such an important role in our lives throughout the world. And we'll take a look at some of the nuances there too, in terms of where nonprofits are more active. But when we think of nonprofits, we usually think about the organizations that we've been involved with and those that we've volunteered for or have to be involved with because we're part of a given industry sector or so forth. And there are things like social organizations like newcomers clubs. There's professional associations where you might get a certification and have to maintain that in good standing. Industry sector organizations, and there's 21 industry sectors and all the subsectors, so there can be quite a few. Things like accommodation is an example of an association where you've got your hotels and motels and bed and breakfasts and so forth. But then there's political associations for various parties in democratic countries. There's special cause associations, things that are people get together because they're really interested in things like, let's say, cancer or multiple sclerosis or something like that. So these are organized usually and represented by employees or solely volunteers. And these associations follow a charter or a governing body. And they, receive the revenue to keep the doors open and the lights on, from various sources, such as selling memberships, in engaging people in certification programs, holding events, seeking sponsorships and donations. But at the end of the day, all these nonprofits really enrich our society and they advocate or provide a voice for the people that they serve. Promoting things like education or providing services that government cannot provide or bringing attention to important issues. And they really play a role in creating a more equitable and thriving community. And if we just think about the kind of organizations that we've been involved in, I looked at, the LinkedIn profiles for all the people that were indicated that they would join the webinar today. And I thought, gee, we see Margie involved with the certified management consultants in the USA, Martina probably involved with university alumni. Dan was involved with likely an industry association in the transportation sector. Um, Shabaka in the art world, Sam in testing authority. Dale, of course, you're involved with the Global Benchmarking Network. And I've been involved with ASQ, which is the American Society for Quality. That's what those acronyms stand for. And certified management consultants, the Institute of Certified, also the Institute ISCM Foundation, which is a group that we work with that does nation building projects. So these are all kind of groups that we might be involved with, and we're there because we have to be for professionally, or we really care about the cause, and how we can contribute to that. So whether we're volunteers or we're running these organizations, and I've been in the seat of running an organization years ago. It was the Quality Council of Alberta. We just didn't have the funds any longer to pay for an executive director. So there was a few of us that took turns in that seat in order to keep the organization going. So I kind of know what it's like to be there in the hot seat, I guess you can say, trying to keep the organization going and offering events and member services and good value, for the dollar. So kind of been there. But we're going to ask ourselves as whether we're running these organizations or we're involved as volunteers or we're members of these organizations. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all want our nonprofits to do well, right? And so this webinar is going to talk about how, several ways in which we can take a look at these organizations and help them to become stronger. And we're going to answer these questions. How do you measure up to the principles and practices used by high performing organizations? Because these things apply to all organizations, every size and type. How do you compare to others on the global organizational index that we have uh, been gathering data on since 2015? And it's really interesting when you take a look at organizations around the world by size, industry, sector, region, country. You can see, how you're doing compared to other organizations. And these organizations really vary because some are familiar with excellence models where others have never heard of them before. But we have a nice cross section, so it's a fair comparison. And then, of course, what can you learn from others that have been recognized as high performing organizations? And one of the sources of that information is the National Excellence Award programs. But there are others too that are high performing that might not have received an award. So there's always so much we can learn from high performers, and it's always of interest. In every assignment I've ever done with organizations, they are really eager to get their hands on that kind of information because there's so much that they can learn, a lot of which they can apply to their own organization. So let's start first of all with the nonprofit sector and just take a look at market scope. I took a look at some kind of facts and figures, and it's estimated there's about 10 million organizations around the world in the nonprofit sector. And you can see on the slide some of the statistics for the United States. And it's very interesting. It's a sector that employs close to 12 million people, making it the country's third largest employer after retail and manufacturing. I find that is quite amazing. And then when you take a look in the states, the kind of sources of revenue from these organizations they get from their programs, their donations, the government, and investments and other sources, it's kind of an interesting breakdown. But as we take a look at overall, the global nonprofit kind of market, represents, close to 300 billion, and it's forecasted to be close to 400 billion, by 2029. It's growing. And most of the organizations fall into these types that we have on the screen: human services, education, healthcare, environment, and religion. And what I found very interesting is that we take a look by region, and about 50% of nonprofits are in North America, about 25% are in Europe, and then the remaining 25% are in the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and South America regions, which is interesting. And if you kind of take a look at a particular sector, like let's say those representing healthcare, we'll recognize some of the key players like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the American Red Cross. When we take a look at environment, the Nature Conservancy, and when we take a look at, let's say, things like business, you've got things like the Rotary Foundation and so forth. I mean, some of these are recognizable to us around the world with the very good work that they're doing. But the driving factor for growth these days, when you take a look at where the numbers are now and where they're going to be by 2029, I mean, the driving factor for growth is because of the increasing emphasis on corporate social responsibility. And a lot of organizations, of course, wanting to support good causes. And then quite a few organizations getting involved in doing that. I was just having a conversation the other day with someone here in Canada, and they were remarking on how many nonprofits there are here. There's 200,000. That's an awful lot. Sometimes I wonder if there could be a little bit more consolidation, because all of these groups are all out trying to get members or trying to get donations and so forth. So some consolidation might make that a little bit easier, you'd think, but that remains to be seen. These organizations do have some common challenges. I mean, some nonprofits are really healthy. You know, they've got a good membership, they've got steady revenue stream, and they're able to employ staff. And yet there's a lot of nonprofits that are really just run by volunteers, you know, and they just struggle to kind of keep themselves alive. But some of the common challenges, of course, are attracting qualified people to work, meeting the many demands that the customer or the members have, raising those funds, getting the desired results, and then developing some business savvy. I've noticed this on the developing business savvy quite a bit in the work that I've done with nonprofits. That's really variable in terms of, let's say, the executive directors that might be running the organization, or the people that might be sitting on a board. One thing that they could all really do well is learning about, you know, excellence models, the principles and practices that are common to high performing organizations, because this is something that would serve them well, no matter their circumstance. So this is, we're going to talk about other things too in this webinar that are going to be helpful to meeting some of these challenges. And the first thing is the Social Progress Index, which is a wonderful index that's been created to show, you know, the conditions that citizens face in various countries around the world. And it's created to encourage countries to structure things so that citizens can reach their full potential. And it's something that leaders in various sectors are looking to understand, you know, what's going well and what are the vulnerabilities of their communities. It's the index is comprised of, you know, 12 components and 60 indicators that measure social performance. And I'm just looking at the profile here for Canada, and these things are under some headings like basic human needs, foundations of well-being, and opportunities that are available for people in the country. And each one of the profiles for the countries that they have on their site, and 169 countries have got full snapshots, and about 27 countries just partial snapshots so far. But it really gives us a good picture in each of these countries how people are living and what their needs are. And this year, the index last year in 2022 highlighted that there might be a bit of a social progress recession coming. And although there's been really great progress in the world since 2011, over the last 5 years, the rate of progress has slowed. And some um, areas of concern is the decline in personal rights, which is really unfortunate. And some of the influences for that slowdown have been, you know, the COVID, you know, pandemic, the risks, they say, of climate change, economic turbulence, and political change. And so it's very interesting when you take a look at that, and what this think tank has to say about the numbers, you know, the direction they're going, and why. So here we see, you know, the world score has improved. And in fact, you know, I think it's been an overall increase of, you know, 5.4 points. But then we can see where things are stagnating and, you know, probably not going in a desirable direction. As I look at the snapshot for Canada, a couple of the weak spots that there are for Canada are housing affordability, and also young people that aren't in any education program, training program, or employment. And so you think, well, what can be done about that, you know, and how can the nonprofit sector help? And we can think about things like, on the housing front, there's Habitat for Humanity. And when we think about young people, you know, trying to get them off to a good start so that they can earn a living and support themselves, we think about all sorts of skill development programs, and helping them to be more employable. And even in some of the nonprofits, like I know with ASQ, they've got this great Next Gen program that really helps people understand, the benefits of belonging to that organization and what it can do for them professionally. So associations play a very important role there. So the other thing we want to talk about today is the Organizational Excellence Index, and this has been a study that was started back in 2015, and I've been working like a devil on it, along with hundreds of researchers, over the years to be able to create this index for the very first time. And what it does is it's captured the current state of organizational excellence in organizations by size, industry, sector, and region. In some cases, we've got some really good data on given countries, high responding countries, which is lucky for them, right? Because they can really take a good look at what's going on in their country by industry sector and size and so forth. But we also get perspectives from people in different roles, like leadership, management, staff, and other like people that are sitting on as board members in organizations. So it's really been fascinating to see what's going well and what needs to improve in the world. And I think particularly exciting about this whole effort, I mean, number one, it's never been done before, but number two is that if you can get more organizations learning about excellence and applying it to their organization, you get more high performing organizations or strengthened organizations. All of this helps contribute to the economy, trade, and trickles into resident quality of life because these higher performing organizations, they're employing people, they're buying goods and services, they're making donations or volunteering in the community. And so that we see the results, buoying up the economy, making it easier for organizations to become ready to trade and so forth. So this is an index that leaders can use to see how they measure up to others. And the framework that we're using, the Organizational Excellence Framework, is something that I developed back in 2010. And what it did was it brought together all of the great information that we have with the leading excellence models, which were first developed and have continued to evolve in Europe, EFQM, in the United States, which is Baldrige. Canada has a framework, and Australia has a framework. And this work was done in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And as I said, it's continued to evolve. And what's happened over time is that global research has validated that there's a positive relationship between implementing a model in an organization and improving organizational performance. And I like to call it the formula for success because what you see is it's very formulaic. As organizations implement these practices, they develop a culture that is committed to excellence, and they go on to achieve exceptional results across a balanced system of measurement. And this is any size or any type of organization. And so at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to take advantage of this. Whether you take advantage of it a little or a lot, I mean, it's going to help strengthen the performance of organizations. So as we look at the index, and first of all, we can take a look at the principles. There's 9 principles that characterize a culture that is committed to excellence. And for those 9 principles, we ask organizations to rate how they're doing. And we use a very subjective rating scale on this one. It's kind of a gut feel. How are we doing, on these principles? To what degree do they characterize our organization? And we use kind of a low, medium, high type of rating scale. And where low would be from 0 to 2, where low medium would be 2 to 4, medium would be 4 to 6, and medium high would be 6 to 8, and high would be 8 to 10. So this gives you an idea where organizations sit. And you can see that businesses got a higher rating than nonprofit or government, but they're all relatively close in terms of where they're sitting, which is great. And yet when we take a look by specific industry sector on the principles, all of a sudden we start seeing, a little bit more variability. And nonprofit associations are in the other service category, which is has a rating of 6.5. So that kind of gives you an idea where nonprofits are sitting. But for those nonprofits, and if I just might use the example of the CMC, Certified Management Consulting Organization, which I'm a part of, is that the association might be, rating where they are as an organization in and around the 6.5. But what about their members and consultants? Management consultants sit in the professional, scientific, and technical sector, as a sector. And so you can learn a lot about the members you serve by studying how they're doing as well, on the 9 principles. Where are they strong, where are they weak? And what's really interesting is that these principles are directly related to best management practices across 9 key management areas. And there's quite a direct relationship between, let's say, a principle of leadership involvement, is an example, and the many best management practices across key management areas that relate to and influence it. And so again, it's very formulaic. And this are just the ratings on the key management areas by type of organization. And for this key management areas, when we're taking a look at the best management practices, we use a very objective rating scale. And we take a look or ask people to take a look at the approach that has been being used on a practice. Is it a good approach? Is it fully deployed across the organization? Are they getting results? It also asks people to consider the mindset. Is it a corrective mindset, a preventive mindset, or a continuous improvement mindset? And then the rating scale, again, it goes up from 0 to 10, but there's 4 categories. So from 0 to 2.5 is just beginning. 2.6 to 5 is good start. Then we have doing well, and at the upper end, 7.6 to 10, we have high performing. So a lot of, it's very interesting to see where an organization sits. And what we've noticed with the global research study is that while the respondents rate their organization quite positively on the principles, they drop by about a point when all of a sudden they're taking a look at all these best management practices by key management area. And that's kind of where the rubber hits the road, because you're getting into a lot more detail about what you're doing or not doing, right? And here again, we see in these results, businesses out in front a little bit, followed closely by nonprofit and government. But it's always interesting when you dive down a little bit deeper, into the specific industry sectors, that you start to see some differences. And nonprofit is still holding pretty good with a 6.06 rating here. But the professional, scientific, and technical, let's say using that management consulting example again, all of a sudden, oh, they're down a little bit. And something very interesting, years and years ago, when I first was introducing this framework and the work we were doing to develop a turnkey toolkit to make implementation easier and more time efficient, cost effective, I did a fair bit of work with my CMC colleagues, and it was very interesting when they self-assessed their own organization, their own firms, and we discovered what they were doing or not doing. And one of the things that I always remember that really jumped out at me was that a lot of consultants weren't doing much to monitor customer satisfaction. And we had good discussions about that in the room. Is that, how do you measure customer satisfaction? Why do you want to do that? And what can you do to keep it those ratings high, because that's important. I mean, I always thought in consulting, you're as good as your last project. People talk about you, and that's how you get return and referral business. So it's very, very important to keep something like that top of mind. But I don't want to just pick on the consultants. I mean, I think that we find this in every single industry sector. There are some learnings there that are very valuable to them. And when we do this on an organization basis, and we're dealing with leaders that are considering the ratings that all of their employees provide and all their open-ended comments, there are always things that surprise leaders, things they didn't know about, things they can act on right away, and that make a real huge difference to the organization. Every single organization is different, and every single organization gets a huge return on investment as a result of doing this. So this is it's always really, really interesting. So when we think about high performing organizations too, this is where a lot of organizations that we've worked with and people that we do webinars for and that sort of thing, they're keenly interested in high performing organizations. And most of them start with organizations just like them, you know. So if let's say you're involved in the transportation business, you want to know about other high performing transportation organizations. Or if you're in healthcare, the same thing. But healthcare is an example that can also learn a lot from hospitality organizations like hotels because they have similar processes. Do you know? And then what can they learn from manufacturing? Because they've got similar processes to manufacturing as well. So as people get a bit more sophisticated in this, they learn an awful lot from other types of high performing organizations. And when you work in this field, you know that every single organization that's high performing has got some value there to share with others, great ideas that they can provide to other organizations about how they can up their game. So we like to, be able to provide this sort of information. And then Dale, who's on the call today, he's an expert in benchmarking, and a global expert in benchmarking. He's done a lot of benchmarking studies, and is very involved with the Global Benchmarking Network. These are ways that we can use these high performing organizations to learn from and benchmark our own performance against. So just a few examples I want to share with you today. And these have been national award recipients. And just to give you an idea of the kind of things that they've been able to achieve by putting an excellence model in place. And the first one is Elevations Credit Union. And back between 2018 and 2019, after they had, implemented this model, that they were producing more mortgages annually than any other credit union in their state. And when you took a look at an assessment by the American Credit Union Mortgage Association, they ranked Elevations as number 11 out of the top 300 credit unions in the nation. And it really outpaced their size, their asset size, which ranked 127 out of 300. And their ability to lend only in the state of Colorado. But by the spring of 2020, Elevations ranked in the top 95% of US organizations for overall employee engagement, based on a Gallup survey. And when you took a look at the loans that they were providing, their production increased from less than 50 million in 2015 to about 175 million in 2019. So and even with that increase, their losses in relation to the loan portfolio growth remained at zero. So they were doing really well in terms of the loans that were provided. Another good example is the Association for Retired Persons. And this group really did an amazing job after, successfully implementing an excellence model. They doubled their reach on their work to impact lives from 32 million people in 2015 to more than 60 million in 2019. That's, almost double, right? And in 2018, they were able to establish a brain health fund to accelerate research into different types of dementia and including Alzheimer's. And the fund was launched with 60 million investment in the Dementia Discovery Fund. Pretty substantial, work that they're doing. They also created, to encourage adoption of their products and services in the marketplace, they created a $40 million innovation fund that provided capital to innovative companies that were focused on improving the lives of the 50 plus segment of the population and their families. And the benchmark data around that time showed AARP to be in the 94th percentile of national comparisons for the employee survey item. My job makes me feel like I am part of something meaningful. So another organization that's doing really well in terms of how their employees feel about working with them. Annual spending on staff training has increased over a number of years to 2.5 million right now. And in response to the COVID pandemic, one thing that they did that was really interesting is they launched the Community Connections program, which was an online platform that was serving about 500,000 users. And they helped to create nearly 800 mutual aid groups in communities nationwide in 2020. So this is amazing work that they've been able to do. And it's funny, when you do work with organizations, they're able to do amazing things. I remember doing the work with a government ministry here in Canada, who they're in the business of infrastructure, huge capital projects, and they put the excellence model in place, and they really got their ministry operating like a finely tuned engine. And their capital projects were big projects, that like auditoriums and tourism attractions and this sort of thing. Well, along comes the health ministry, and they say, gee, infrastructure, can you help us build some hospitals? And they said, sure. And so they were able to absorb 150 people and go on to build hospitals without missing a beat. And they said that the reason that they were able to do that is because they had such a good management system in place with the excellence model that it allowed them to adapt to that significant change very seamlessly. Here's another organization called Donor Alliance, and they're in the business of organ procurement and tissue procurement. And it's one of the top organ program organizations in the United States. And they have a high organ donor conversion rate of more than 80%, which is amazing. And so these are the people who registered themselves to be donors. And they were able to increase, people willing to be organ donors pretty significantly over time, as well as those that say, yeah, we'll be tissue donors of skin and bone as well, right? So it's pretty impressive, the work that they've done. And on the other, in terms of those that they work with too, like the 4 local transplant center that they work with, the customers reported 100% satisfaction in the survey that they did back in 2018. And that's not too bad when you get a score like that when you're taking a look at the satisfaction of those that you're serving. So this is, of course, this excellence model helped them to perform at a very, very high level. So where do you start? If you haven't done this kind of work before, where do you start if you want to improve and get exceptional results and strengthen your organization, get continually improving results? And what we've got is a very streamlined process that can allow you to take full advantage of this in no time flat. Attend a session to learn more about, well, what is organizational excellence? Better understanding of the rating scales, which then allows you to complete the self-assessment of your organization in fully understanding how you're rating all of the principles and the best management practices. And this assessment can be just the leader doing it, or it could be all the employees or a good cross section of the employees. It really, really doesn't matter. But what you end up with is a confidential report with your aggregate results. So how are you doing? What's going well? What needs to improve? And for those things that need to improve, there's individual action plans that you can use to address gaps. And the beautiful thing about the action plans is they can be assigned to employees and over a given time frames. Most of the work that we do in this area doesn't cost anything. It's a little bit of employees' time. The only cost you would have is if, let's say, you needed some help. Maybe you needed some training or you needed some assistance. Then, of course, there's out-of-pocket costs that go along with that. But the beautiful thing about this work is it can be absorbed into employee time, and you take only on as much as you can handle. So a small percentage of time, and your time frame can be as long as you want it to be. So you can be really aggressive with this, or you can just stretch it out over a number of years. But the whole process that we've got, because we've got this turnkey toolkit, it's just made everything more simple and straightforward and time efficient and cost effective. And what you see here is just a few hours, of time. So it's something that you can do for the association itself, or you could do with your members. Let's say your members want to know how they're doing. And we've been able to do these kind of real-time assessments with organizations or associations, with government entities that want to know how they're doing. With associations, we just did a real-time assessment in Australia as an example with an association there. I remember doing, lots of work here, club managers that wanted their own individual reports. They were part of an association, but the focus was on the members and their individual reports. And so we've done lots of that sort of thing. So you can scale it however you want. And what comes out of it is a lot of good information for the association and or their members, or both. So it's really up to you the way you want to take advantage of it, but it's all directed at strengthening performance. And so just to finish off, a few notes about the people that we've got in our organization around the world. We've got a team of people that are licensed to use this turnkey toolkit. And the turnkey toolkit includes things like a publication that you can download at no charge on the homepage of our website. We've got a scenario game, an entire workshop series, an automated assessment and reporting tool, the global index, so you can compare performance, and a train the trainer program. So, how can an association use this? Well, they could train their own trainers if they wanted to deliver these programs and services, or they could showcase what they're doing with us, and we'll broadcast it to the world, so you can reap the promotional benefit. You can elevate your reputation, showing that you've got a commitment to excellence, and you can quantify your progress year after year after year if you do these assessments or work with your members to do the assessments, to really just show how you're tangibly improving or strengthening what you're doing. And of course, we're very involved globally with groups that always keep us on leading edge of information and allow us to keep everything up to date, and keep our skill set current. And then, of course, we've been invited to do, nation building projects with this toolkit. So that's a nice feather in our cap. But also, we're getting involved in doing training with entrepreneurship programs around the world as well. So I'm really, really pleased with that. It's the fact that it's been adopted really in a short space of time, since we first introduced this back in 2010 and developed the toolkit in the initial couple of years. It's really been accepted, and it's being used in over 70 countries now in the world, which is, fantastic. And that was my vision, actually. Populate the world with more people who know about this so they can use it to their advantage in their organizations or with the organizations that they work with. And that has far reaching benefit when you think about the difference that it could make, not only to those organizations that are higher performing, but to local economy, trade, and resident quality of life. So it's all about making a difference, and that's what's important. On our end is empowering others. And so I'll just end there, and then we can open it up to have a conversation. So I'll stop the recording now.